The universe may be splitting in half. This is the theory that is causing discomfort even among the most skeptical physicists on the planet. According to some scientists, the fundamental structure of reality, the fabric of space-time, may be breaking down, creating cracks that could lead to the collapse of everything we know. This is not fiction. This is being discussed in labs and scientific papers right now. And if this hypothesis is correct, time, gravity, matter, everything could start to fail in unpredictable ways. The question is, has this already started happening? Are we ignoring obvious signs? In this video, you will see why this theory is being taken so seriously, and what could happen if it's right. Do you believe the universe can just stop working? Comment below. What do you think is behind reality? Your answer may be more important than you think. Now get ready. The following information could completely change your view of the universe and even your own existence. To understand what the idea of a rupture in the fabric of space-time means, we must first consider how modern science views the universe itself. Since Einstein's theory of general relativity, we have known that space and time are not separate things. They form a single interconnected structure, space-time. Think of it as a vast, flexible, deformable cosmic fabric that bends and stretches in the presence of mass and energy. Everything in existence, stars, planets, galaxies, even light, moves within this invisible mesh. This model has allowed us to predict phenomena such as black holes and gravitational waves, both of which have been confirmed experimentally. But there is a limit. Relativity accurately describes the behavior of massive objects on large scales. However, when we enter the realm of the extremely small, subatomic particles, raw energy, the rules change. That's where quantum gravity comes in. Quantum gravity is a still, unified field of physics that attempts to reconcile the principles of quantum mechanics with general relativity. One of the most debated theories in this context is string theory, which proposes that the smallest units of the universe are not particles, but vibrating strings in multiple dimensions. And according to some interpretations, these strings can vibrate in an unstable way, causing serious distortions in the fabric of space-time, as if it were being torn or perforated. Imagine pulling hard on a stretchy towel until it snaps at a specific point. That would be a visual analogy for what some physicists believe is possible. Regions of the universe where space-time doesn't just warp, it literally breaks. And if that happens, the effects could be catastrophic, because the known laws of physics would stop working at that point. Time, light, gravity, nothing would behave the same way. But the most disturbing question is not whether this could happen. It is whether it has already happened, and on such distant or small scales that we can yet detect it. Some even propose that events like black holes, vacuum fluctuations, or certain extreme quantum behaviors could be local manifestations of this kind of disruption. But this raises another, even more disconcerting possibility. What if these faults aren't just local? What if there are larger fissures, slowly and steadily growing in the very fabric of the universe? Imagine looking up at the sky and realizing that it is no longer stable. The colors begin to oscillate between shades you have never seen before. The blue disappears. In its place, violet spots appear, orange bands in motion, as if the sky had lost its original programming. The sunlight no longer follows a pattern. Time seems to slow down in some places on Earth and speed up in others. In specific places, clock hands spin erratically, computers fail, and GPS signals point to places that do not exist. This would be the first visible sign of a rupture, the collapse of the laws that govern reality. Gravity, for example, would no longer behave as a constant force. In some regions, it would become more intense, crushing structures with its invisible weight. In others, it would be almost null, causing objects to levitate or float without control. The ground would no longer be reliable. Natural movements, such as the rotation of the Earth or the flow of the tides, would begin to show distortions. Soon, rifts would appear, rifts in time itself, regions of the planet where past, present, and future events seemed to overlap. People would see echoes of actions that had not yet occurred. Others would report memories that were not theirs. These rifts would not be visible to the naked eye like physical cracks, but their effects would be detectable. Instability in matter, visual distortions, voices appearing out of nowhere, and even the instantaneous disappearance of particles in laboratory experiments. Reality in this scenario would not disintegrate like a fragile object breaking, but rather like a corrupted code. A systemic failure in something we have always considered immutable. The very dimensions, height, width, depth, and time, would begin to lose their coherence. Space would no longer obey three-dimensional logic, and time would no longer flow linearly. The practical consequences of this would be unpredictable. The concept of distance would become irrelevant. Locations could overlap in space. Time could stop, repeat, or advance randomly. And most frightening of all, no human instrument would be able to stabilize these anomalies. But there's an even more disturbing variable in this scenario. What if these changes aren't random, but follow a pattern we don't yet understand? A pattern that might be trying to tell us something about the structure of the universe, or what comes next. Faced with a scenario where time, space, and gravity begin to fail, what do you think would happen to human consciousness? Would it resist the collapse, or would it be taken along with everything else? Comment below. What would be, in your opinion, the first psychological effect we would feel when faced with a breakdown in reality? I want to know your theory, and whoever is reading the comments, join in the debate. Because if the universe stops working as we know it, the biggest challenge may not lie in the machines, but in what happens inside the human mind when everything we call real begins to crumble. And there is a detail that many ignore. Some researchers believe that the first signs of this are already manifesting themselves, not in space, but in the way we perceive time. If reality were to start failing in observable ways, the human reaction would not be immediate. It would be instinctive. Initially, most people would not understand what was happening. Small gravitational collapses, glitches in time, spatial distortions. They would all be mistaken for technological failures or unusual natural phenomena. But as events intensified, collective panic would become inevitable. Governments would try to contain information, not out of malice, but out of fear of chaos. Documents would be classified, signals would be censored, and simplified explanations would be released to maintain public order. Official versions would be created, distorting the truth to maintain control. At the same time, scientific institutions around the world would go on high alert, trying to understand the causes of the phenomenon and seeking ways to contain it, or at least predict what would come next. In large cities, the practical consequences would take hold. Communications systems would fail, global logistics would go haywire. Unstable climates, electrical failures, and changes in local gravity would render entire areas uninhabitable. People would be displaced. Regions of the planet could be isolated because of field anomalies, areas where the physics appear different, and entering them would mean subjecting yourself to the unpredictable. Psychologically, reactions would vary. Some would go into denial, treating the signs as sensationalism. Others would plunge into mass hysteria, creating cults, mystical explanations, apocalyptic predictions. There would still be those who would embrace science, seeking answers in data, in experiments, in empirical observations, trying to understand what is crumbling behind reality. Social media would become the center stage for global hysteria. Videos of visual distortions, reports of time lapses, regions where time seemed to stand still, all would go viral. And as the evidence mounted, the lines between truth and paranoia would blur. But in the midst of this scenario, a silent question would begin to form in all minds, connected to the problem. What if this is not a spontaneous collapse? What if there is a reason behind the instability, something that science is not yet seeing? The human brain is wired to recognize stable patterns. The notion of time, space, gravity, and continuity is processed by neurological structures that expect consistency. But what if the universe around us no longer offers this stability? What would happen to consciousness if reality itself became erratic? Human perception depends on fixed references. Our sense of time, for example, is deeply tied to the rhythm of our environment, the Earth's rotation, our heartbeats, natural cycles. If these foundations began to fail, our brains would go into conflict. Time would pass erratically, and our minds would not know how to interpret it. Minutes would seem like hours, days would fade from memory, and the distinction between past, present, and future would no longer be clear. From a neuroscientific perspective, this would directly affect memory formation, spatial orientation, and even personal identity. With reality fragmented, the mind would lose its anchoring. People could develop false recognitions, memories of events that never occurred, or distortions in the perception of their own existence. The feeling of being in the world, what we call consciousness, would be corroded by incoherent stimuli. The human nervous system, even though highly adaptable, has limits. In extreme environments, such as deep isolation or sensory deprivation, we have already observed mental breakdowns. Imagine then facing a universe where laws change in real time, where gravity oscillates, where time folds in on itself. The human mind would be exposed to an unprecedented type of cognitive stress. Furthermore, questions that are impossible to answer logically would begin to arise. If time is unreliable, can I trust my memories? If space is unstable, can I trust where I am? Consciousness, in this scenario, would become a process of constant recalibration, trying to adapt to a world where nothing is predictable anymore. But there's an even stranger hypothesis being floated by some neuroscientists and theoretical physicists. What if consciousness is indeed just suffering from the instability of the universe? What if it's interacting with it? What if human perception is more than a passive observer and is directly connected to the glitches that are beginning to manifest? In a universe where even the laws of physics can fail, trusting what is real becomes a daily challenge. When everything around us may be just an illusion sustained by an unstable system, understanding these phenomena becomes a necessity, not a curiosity. That's why every like on this video is not just a gesture. It's a way to keep this type of content alive, relevant and present for those who also seek answers where science and mystery intersect. So, leave your like on this video. Now imagine a reality where the boundaries between worlds are no longer fixed, where what we know as the universe may be just a fraction of something much larger and possibly much more unstable. Some scientists believe that signs of this possibility have already begun to appear. The question is, are we ready to see what lies beyond the boundary we have always believed to be the end? If a rupture in the fabric of space-time really exists, the inevitable question is, what is on the other side? The answer, however speculative it may seem, is not ignored by science. Theoretical physics has seriously considered the possibility that the known universe is not the only one. The multiverse theory, once marginal, now integrates mathematical models that attempt to explain everything from the origin of the cosmos to observed flaws in fundamental laws. According to some models, our universe would be just one bubble among infinite others, each with its own physical laws, dimensions and ways of organizing matter. The rupture we are talking about here could be, in practice, a fissure between these bubbles. a point of contact between distinct realities with incompatible fundamental structures, dimensions that coexist but do not intersect, until now. This idea gains strength in contexts such as cosmic inflation and studies on vacuum energy. In some theories, extreme quantum fluctuations can open unstable microportals. What if one of these openings expands? The universe would cease to be an isolated space and would start to interconnect with systems that follow other logics, something for which we are not prepared. The most disturbing thing is that if these connections really occur, we will have no way of predicting their consequences. A universe with a different gravitational constant could collapse ours just by interacting with it. Or what if we are the unstable universe, about to be consumed by a more cohesive reality? In both scenarios, our existence becomes just a fragment in a larger whole, indifferent to our logic. The idea of multiple realities ceases to be a fantasy when current physical models themselves point to this possibility. And if a rupture allows contact between them, the effects would not only be physical, but existential. Everything we know as truth could be just one version among many. But there is another, even more provocative question, one that few dare to raise. What if these cracks are not accidental? What if the connection between worlds is being caused by something or someone? As absurd as the idea of a rupture in the fabric of space-time may seem, science has advanced models that not only consider this possibility, but also attempt to explain it. And among the most cited theories, string theory occupies a central role. It proposes that the universe is not composed of point particles, but of tiny vibrating strings in multiple dimensions. The tension, frequency, and interaction of these strings would determine the properties of matter. A failure in this vibration, according to the model, could generate localized instabilities, as if parts of space-time lost their cohesion and collapsed. Another point of analysis comes from wormholes. These hypothetical bridges in space-time, predicted mathematically by relativity, would be shortcuts between distant points in the universe, or even between different universes. The existence of an unstable or artificially opened wormhole could cause unpredictable distortions, including the rupture of dimensions that should not coexist. In parallel, we have the so-called unstable vacuum bubbles. In models based on quantum fields, the vacuum that we perceive as empty may not be the most stable state in the universe. If a more true vacuum bubble were to emerge and expand, it would consume the known universe at a speed faster than the speed of light, redefining the laws of physics wherever it went, without warning and without any possibility of reaction. There is also speculation surrounding the Higgs field, the force that gives particles mass. Extreme fluctuations in this field can alter the structure of matter on microscopic scales. This could create localized crack-like collapses in space-time, with unpredictable consequences for any structure that relies on the stability of mass. And among all these explanations, one is gaining more and more ground, not because it is the most accepted, but because it is the most disturbing, the simulated universe hypothesis. If we live in a reality generated by an advanced computational structure, a programming failure, or external interference could be interpreted by us as a physical rupture, when in fact it would be a distortion in the system that sustains our existence. None of these theories are a consensus, but the simple fact that they are being considered by theoretical physicists, mathematicians, and research institutions already indicates something important. The anomalies we are trying to understand may not be errors in the universe, but clues that we are still looking at it in a limited way. The idea of a tear in the fabric of space-time is usually dismissed as something far-fetched, theoretical, or futuristic. But what if we're making a mistake in our perception? What if the signs that reality is unraveling are already all around us, subtle, too complex to notice, but real? Some physicists have been observing anomalous behavior in fundamental constants of the universe. Values such as the fine structure constant, which determines the strength of electromagnetic forces, appear to show tiny variations in certain regions of space. For most measurements, these fluctuations are irrelevant. But some question whether these oscillations could be indicators of instability, as if the universe were out of whack at certain points. The Large Hadron Collider, LHC, is also often the subject of speculation, some of it bolder than official science admits. There are records of experiments in which particles behaved in completely unpredictable ways, violating statistical expectations and consolidated models. On a quantum scale, this could suggest failures in the coherence of the physical system, not as calculation errors, but as real ruptures that directly affect the logic of space-time. In the field of quantum physics, there are phenomena that continue to defy understanding. Instantaneous entanglement between particles separated by vast distances, collisions that generate incoherent data, and even observations that seem to depend on the presence of a conscious observer. These events, although studied, raise a question. Are we really understanding the deeper layers of reality? Or are we just seeing the superficial effects of a structure that is beginning to fail? If this hypothesis is correct, the rupture would not come with visible explosions or distortions, but with subtle failures that gradually dismantle the system without most people noticing. An experiment that is slightly off-kilter, a value that doesn't hold, a result that no one can replicate. Each small failure could be part of a bigger picture. And the most uncomfortable thing is this. Perhaps there is no perceptible before and after. Perhaps the rupture is already underway, silently, gradually. And the reality we live in today is just a corrupted version of something that no longer exists as it should. Thinking about this possibility opens up space for other, even more disturbing questions. And that's where I want to bring you into this conversation. What crazy, scary, or impossible hypothesis about the universe has ever crossed your mind? That theory that seems too absurd to say out loud, but that deep down, you feel like there might be something real behind it. Comment below, because the most intriguing ideas could become the channel's next videos. Let us explore the unknown together, and maybe you will be the one to ask the next question that science hasn't yet dared to answer. What if all of this, these ruptures, these fault lines, these anomalies, are not mere cosmic accidents, but signs that we are reaching the limits of what we can understand? What if the universe is warning us, in ways we can't yet decipher, that the fabric of reality is not as solid as we imagine? For centuries, science has advanced, revealing layers of the universe as if opening pages of an infinite book. But perhaps we're only scratching the surface. Perhaps we are looking at shadows cast by something we cannot fully see. What if there is a point at which the human capacity to observe becomes insufficient in the face of the complexity of what exists? This possibility raises an uncomfortable question. How do we prepare for something we cannot understand? How do we react to a threat that is not visible, not direct, but that is silently eroding the basis of existence? The answer may not lie in the calculations, but in the questions we avoid asking. What if the sense of reality lies not in the universe itself, but in the way we experience it? If everything that exists can fail, what really matters in the time that remains functional? This is the part that connects us to the present. While science searches for answers, each of us lives within a system that can collapse. And this forces us to reflect on the value of the now. Ultimately, the fear of losing reality may reveal more about our human condition than any quantum theory. Because if everything we believe in is just a temporary construct, what remains when structure disappears? What still makes sense when the universe ceases to obey logic? And perhaps the most disturbing thing is not the rupture itself, but the possibility that it is already happening, and that we just don't have enough intelligence to recognize it. This type of questioning does not appear in the news, nor in school books. And even within science, few are looking in this direction. So, send this video now to that friend who also feels that there is something wrong with reality. That person who questions the obvious, who loves cosmic theories and doesn't accept easy answers. Let's expand this conversation with those who really see beyond the surface. If the universe really is coming apart, will we have time to understand what awaits us on the other side? Or will reality simply cease to exist before we can react? In a system that can fail without warning, every moment of consciousness may be the last chance to understand who we are and where we are. The fact is, no one has all the answers. But as the laws that underpin the universe show signs of fraying, one thing is clear: we are living on the edge of the unknown. And the further we go, the more we realize that reality may be a lot less solid than we once believed. Being a part of this isn't just about watching videos, it is exploring hypotheses that challenge everything we know about time, space, and existence. If you want to continue accessing the most intriguing theories, the most hidden mysteries, and the discoveries that have not yet made headlines, activate the bell and subscribe now. Because here, every question leads to a new riddle, and there are many more waiting for you. And since we're talking about what might be crumbling behind reality, now click on the video that appears on your screen. You'll discover something you may never have considered, but that could completely change the way you see the universe.